space station hung in the darkness like a jewel made of metal and glass. Epsilon Prime was the largest neutral station in the galaxy, a place where hundreds of alien species came to talk instead of fight. Today, it would host one of the most important meetings in human history. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his quarters, watching ships from a dozen different worlds dock at the station's ports. Some were sleek and silver, others looked like living creatures made of crystal. His own transport ship seemed small and plain next to them, but Jake did not care. Humanity had finally earned a seat at the Galactic Council, and he was here to make sure they kept it. The door opened behind him. He turned and smiled as Dr. Amy Collins walked in, carrying a data pad and looking worried. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms, and she had spent the last 5 years learning everything she could about the other species in the galaxy. Her brown hair was tied back, and her green eyes were focused on the information scrolling across her screen. "The Zenthari are going to be difficult," she said without looking up. "Their empire has controlled the Outer Rim mining rights for 300 years. They will not want to share." Jake walked over and gently took the data pad from her hands. "You have been reading that same report for 6 hours. Take a break." Amy looked up at him and sighed. "I just want this to go well. Humanity deserves this chance, Jake. We have worked so hard to prove we belong here." He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "And we will prove it again today. Your research is solid. The council will listen." She leaned against him for a moment, then pulled away with a small smile. "You are right. Let me get ready. The session starts in an hour." The council chamber was enormous. It was a circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Each species had their own section, and the variety was stunning. There were beings made of light, creatures with 6 arms, and others that floated in tanks of liquid. At the highest tier sat the council leaders, representing the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Jake and Amy took their places in the human section. There were only 4 of them compared to the dozens or hundreds that other species had brought. Ambassador Chris Palmer sat to Jake's left, an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes. On Amy's right was Lieutenant Ben Hughes, their security officer, who looked uncomfortable in his formal uniform. The session began. Various species presented proposals and disputes. Jake listened carefully, trying to understand the complex politics at play. After 2 hours, it was humanity's turn. Amy walked down to the central platform. She looked small and alone down there, but her voice was clear and strong when she spoke. "Honored council members, I come before you today to discuss the mining rights in the Outer Rim territories. For centuries, the Zenthari Empire has held exclusive access to these resources. However, recent surveys have shown that the asteroid fields contain more than enough valuable minerals for multiple species to share. I propose a cooperative mining agreement that would benefit everyone involved." She activated a holographic display that showed the asteroid fields and her research data. The presentation was clear and well organized. Several council members leaned forward with interest. Then Commander Vexthor stood up. The Zenthari were a warrior race. They stood over 7 feet tall with gray skin covered in thick armor-like scales. Their eyes glowed red, and their mouths were filled with sharp teeth. Vexthor was one of their most decorated military commanders, and he looked at Amy like she was an insect. "The human speaks of sharing," his voice rumbled through the chamber. "This is because humans are weak and cannot take what they want through strength. The Zenthari claimed those territories through conquest. They are ours by right of blood." Amy remained calm. "With respect, Commander, the galaxy has moved beyond the age of conquest. The Council was formed to promote cooperation, not domination. My research shows that working together would actually increase resource extraction by 40% compared to current methods." Vexthor's eyes narrowed. "You dare lecture me about cooperation, human? Your species has been in space for less than 100 years. We have built an empire that spans 1,000 systems. You are children playing at politics." "Perhaps," Amy said quietly. "But even children can have good ideas. I am not here to challenge your empire, Commander. I am here to offer a path forward that benefits everyone." Her words seemed to reach some of the neutral council members. Jake saw several of them nodding and making notes. The Zenthari delegation noticed it too. The session continued for another hour, with various species asking questions about Amy's proposal. She answered each one with patience and detailed knowledge. By the end, it was clear that she had won over a significant portion of the council. A vote would be scheduled for the following week. As the session ended, Jake felt proud. Amy had done brilliantly. They gathered their materials and prepared to leave the chamber. Dr. Collins, Vexthor's voice stopped them. The Zenthari commander was standing near one of the exits. A moment of your time. Amy glanced at Jake. He did not like it, but this was a public space with hundreds of witnesses. It is fine, she said. I will catch up with you. Jake, Chris, and Ben walked toward their quarters, but something made Jake stop. A feeling in his gut, an instinct that had kept him alive through dangerous situations before. He turned back. I will wait for her, he told the others. Go ahead. He positioned himself where he could see the exit Amy had taken. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Jake's unease grew. He started walking back toward the council chamber. The corridor was empty and quiet. Then he heard a sound that made his blood turn cold. A cry of pain cut short. Jake ran. He found her lying on the floor near a service corridor. Her face was bleeding and she was not moving. Above her stood Vexthor, his armored hand still raised. The Zenthari commander looked down at Amy's unconscious body and laughed. Humans break so easily, Vexthor said when he saw Jake. She needed to learn respect. Consider this a lesson for your entire species. 2 Zenthari guards appeared from the shadows. They blocked Jake's path to Vexthor as the commander walked away, his laughter echoing down the corridor. Jake dropped to his knees beside Amy. Her pulse was weak but steady. Blood ran down her face from a deep cut across her cheek. Her arm was bent at a wrong angle. He activated his emergency communicator. Medical emergency, Corridor 7, Section 12. Human injured, critical condition. The medical team arrived within minutes. They were efficient, placing Amy on a stretcher and rushing her toward the station's hospital. Jake followed, his mind strangely calm and cold. As he watched them take Amy through the hospital doors, something shifted inside him. The other species thought they understood humans. They thought humanity was just another species trying to find its place in the galaxy. They were wrong. They had just made the biggest mistake in their civilization's history. They had hurt his mate, and they were about to learn what that meant. Jake pulled out his communicator and sent a single encrypted message to Earth. It contained just 3 words, but those 3 words would change the galaxy forever. They hurt her. The message reached Earth 13 hours later. It traveled through communication relays, bouncing from station to station until it arrived at the military command center in Geneva. The officer on duty read the 3 words and immediately activated the emergency protocol. Within minutes, alarms rang through every military installation on Earth. Admiral Lisa Grant was in a meeting when her personal communicator buzzed with the priority alert. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. Without a word to the people around her, she stood and left the room at a run. The command center was chaos when she arrived. Officers were pulling up star maps and fleet positions. Communication channels were lighting up as ships across human space responded to the recall signal. General Kevin Hayes was already there, his jaw set in a hard line. What do we know? Lisa asked. Kevin pulled up a holographic display. Captain Morrison sent the alert code from Epsilon Prime. His partner, Dr. Amy Collins, was assaulted by a Zenthari commander. She is in critical condition. Station security is calling it an accident. An accident, Lisa repeated, her voice flat. The Zenthari have diplomatic immunity. The station authorities refuse to arrest the commander. Kevin's hands were clenched into fists. They are protecting him. Lisa looked at the star map showing human ships scattered across dozens of systems. Mining operations, research missions, colony supply runs, patrol routes. Thousands of people doing their jobs, building humanity's future in the galaxy. Get me the president, she said. President Laura Mitchell appeared on the screen 15 minutes later. She was in her private office and her face showed that she already knew why this call was happening. How bad is it? She asked. Lisa sent her the medical reports. The president read in silence, her expression growing darker with each line. Amy had severe head trauma. Her skull was fractured. The doctors had placed her in an induced coma to reduce brain swelling. They could not say if she would ever wake up. There is video, Kevin said quietly. He played the footage that a station worker had leaked to the human delegation. The recording showed everything. Amy standing alone in the corridor, Vexthor approaching her. His words were clear. You embarrassed me in front of the council, human. That was a mistake. Then he struck her with his armored fist, a blow that would have killed most species instantly. Amy fell like a puppet with cut strings. Vexthor stood over her laughing before walking away. The president watched the video 3 times. Each time her face grew harder. "What are our options?" she asked. "We can file a formal protest with the Galactic Council," Lisa said. "We can request Vexthor be tried for assault. We can threaten to withdraw from the council." "And none of that will work," Laura said. It was not a question. "No, ma'am. The Zenthari Empire is too powerful. The council will not risk offending them over one human. They will call it an unfortunate incident and move on." The president was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What is Operation Homecoming?" Kevin and Lisa exchanged glances. "It is a contingency protocol," Kevin said slowly. "Created when we first joined the galactic community. It was designed for a specific scenario." "What scenario?" "If one of our people is seriously harmed by another species, and the galactic authorities refuse to provide justice, then humanity responds as one. Every human ship, military and civilian, returns to defend our own. It is a show of force, a message that we protect each other no matter what." "It has never been activated," Lisa added. "The Joint Chiefs always believed it would start a war." Laura looked at the video again, at Amy lying motionless on the floor, at Vexthor laughing. "Activate it," she said. "Ma'am, the Zenthari have the largest military in the galaxy. If we challenge them—" "I said activate it," the president repeated, her voice cold as space. "They hurt one of ours. They need to understand what that means." The order went out on every frequency, every channel, every communication network that humanity used. It was simple and clear. Operation Homecoming is active. All human vessels are to cease current operations and converge on Epsilon Prime. This is not a request. This is a recall. Come home. The response was immediate. In the mining fields of the Kelos Belt, 3 cargo ships loaded with valuable ore cut their towing cables and turned toward Epsilon Prime. The ore would drift into space, representing millions of credits in lost profit. The captains did not care. At a research station studying a nebula, scientists abandoned experiments that had taken years to set up. They boarded their ship and set course for the station. Their data was valuable, irreplaceable even. It did not matter. Colony supply ships diverted from their routes. Patrol vessels broke formation. Even civilian transports carrying tourists changed their flight plans. Every human ship, no matter where they were or what they were doing, began the journey to Epsilon Prime. And the military fleet, the pride of Earth's defense forces, dropped everything and headed for the station at maximum speed. The Galactic Council watched in confusion. Species did not behave this way. They did not abandon profitable operations. They did not leave their posts. They did not rally together over a single individual, but humans did. On Epsilon Prime, Jake sat beside Amy's bed in the hospital. The alien doctors had done their best, but they admitted they did not fully understand human biology. Amy's brain was swelling in ways they could not predict. She might die. She might live but never wake up. They simply did not know. Jake held her hand. It was cold. Machines beeped and hummed around them, keeping her alive. He had not left her side since she arrived. Chris brought him food that he did not eat. Ben stood guard at the door, keeping reporters and curious aliens away. "The fleet is coming," Chris said quietly. "All of them. The Admiral says they will be here in 2 days." Jake nodded but did not look away from Amy's face. She looked peaceful, like she was just sleeping. But he knew better. He could see the bandages covering the side of her head. He could hear the breathing machine that worked because her body could not do it alone. "The Council wants to talk," Chris continued. "They are concerned about the human ships converging here. They are calling it an aggressive act." "Good," Jake said. It was the first word he had spoken in hours. "Jake, they are threatening to deny us docking rights. They might try to turn the ships away." Now Jake did look up. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they were also completely cold. Chris took a step back without meaning to. He had known Jake for 10 years, served with him on 3 missions. He had never seen that look before. "Let them try," Jake said quietly. "The ships are coming. If the station refuses to let them dock, they will dock anyway. If the station tries to stop them, they will go through the station. Nothing is going to keep humanity away. Not now." Chris swallowed hard. "What do you want me to tell the Council?" Jake turned back to Amy. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Then he said, "Tell them they have 48 hours to arrest Vexthor and turn him over for trial. If they do not, we will come and take him ourselves." "Jake, that is a declaration of war." "No," Jake said softly. "That is a promise." The message was delivered to the Galactic Council within the hour. The response was immediate and dismissive. The Council would not arrest a Zenthari commander based on human demands. Vexthor had diplomatic immunity. The matter was closed. The Zenthari delegation laughed openly. Commander Vexthor himself appeared before the Council, speaking about teaching humans their place in the galactic order. He was calm and confident. After all, what could humanity possibly do? They were a young species with a small fleet. The Zenthari Empire had crushed civilizations far older and stronger. But in his hospital room, Jake watched the countdown timer on his communicator. 48 hours until the human fleet arrived. 48 hours until the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. He held Amy's hand and waited. The storm was coming. The 48 hours passed like sand through fingers. During that time, the space around Epsilon Prime transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Human ships arrived by the hundreds, then by the thousands. They came from every corner of human space, forming a massive fleet that surrounded the station. The Galactic Council watched with growing alarm. They sent messages demanding that the humans disperse. They threatened sanctions and expulsion from the Council. They warned that this gathering violated a dozen interstellar laws. The humans ignored them all. What terrified the Council most was the composition of the fleet. Yes, there were military vessels, sleek destroyers and cruisers bristling with weapons. But there were also mining ships, their hulls scarred from years of hard work. Research vessels that had never seen combat. Even civilian transports designed to carry families between colonies. Every type of human ship that existed was there, waiting in silent formation. The Zenthari Empire responded with force. Their war fleet, the pride of their military, jumped into the system 30 hours before the deadline. 100 massive warships, each one larger than any human vessel. They had armor that could withstand nuclear blasts, weapons that could crack planets, shields that had turned back every enemy they had ever faced. Commander Vexthor stood on the bridge of the flagship, the conquest of ages. He looked at the human fleet on his displays and smiled. They were insects, annoying perhaps, but ultimately harmless. "This is your final warning," came a transmission from the Zenthari flagship. "Disperse immediately or be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply." The human fleet did not move. They held their positions, thousands of ships in a sphere around Epsilon Prime. Inside the station, millions of aliens from hundreds of species evacuated in panic. They had never seen anything like this. Two massive fleets facing each other, minutes away from war. Ambassador Chris Palmer stood in the council chamber, one of the few humans who remained on the station. The council members were in chaos, shouting at each other in dozens of languages. Finally, the council leader, a being of pure energy named Zorath, managed to restore order. "Ambassador Palmer," Zorath said, its voice crackling with distress. "Your fleet must withdraw. The Zenthari have the right to defend themselves. If you attack, you will be branded as aggressors. Earth will be expelled from the galactic community." Chris looked around the chamber. He saw fear on every face and every gesture. These species had lived under Zenthari dominance for so long that they could not imagine anyone standing against it. "We asked for justice," Chris said calmly. "We asked for Vexthor to face trial for what he did. You refused. You hid behind diplomatic immunity and ancient treaties. You chose the Zenthari over the truth." "One person," Zorath said desperately. "This is all over one person. Is that worth a war?" Chris looked directly at the energy being. "You do not understand humans at all, do you? To us, one person is worth everything, especially when that person is someone's mate." Amy Collins was not just a scientist. She was Jake Morrison's partner, his love, his family. You heard her and laughed about it. You thought we would accept that because we are new, because we are small. He paused and his voice grew harder. You were wrong. The deadline expired. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Both fleets hung in space, weapons armed, shields at maximum. Then the Zenthari fleet opened fire. 3 human mining ships vanished in balls of flame. The Zenthari had chosen the weakest targets to send a message. They expected the human fleet to break, to scatter in fear like every other species had done before them. The human fleet charged. It was not a tactical advance. It was not a strategic maneuver. Every ship, from the smallest transport to the largest battleship, accelerated directly at the Zenthari lines at full speed. They did not fire their weapons. They did not activate special systems. They just flew straight at the enemy like missiles made of metal and fury. The Zenthari fleet opened fire with everything they had. Space filled with energy beams and plasma bolts. More human ships died, torn apart by weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations. 10 ships, 20, 50, the humans kept coming. Then they hit the Zenthari lines. A human cargo hauler, designed to carry ore and supplies, rammed into a Zenthari battlecruiser at a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy was enormous. The battlecruiser's shields held for almost a full second before they collapsed. Then the cargo ship punched through the hull like a bullet through paper. Both ships exploded in a blast that could be seen from the station. A research vessel loaded with antimatter for its experiments flew into the center of a Zenthari carrier group. When it detonated, it took 3 enemy ships with it. The military vessels fought with precision and rage. They darted between the larger Zenthari ships, targeting weak points that humanity had identified over years of careful observation. They were smaller and faster, and they used it to their advantage. But it was the civilians that shocked the galaxy. Families who had been traveling to colonies dumped their belongings into space to reduce weight, then rammed their transports into enemy destroyers. Scientists who had spent their lives studying peaceful phenomena turned their ships into weapons. Every human, regardless of who they were or what they did, fought with the same desperate determination. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Lisa Grant coordinated the attack. Her displays showed the battle in real time. Every red dot that winked out was a human ship, a human life. The cost was terrible, but the Zenthari were paying an even higher price. All ships pattern Delta, she ordered. Focus on their command carriers. Take out their coordination. The human fleet shifted like a living thing. They swarmed around the largest Zenthari vessels, ignoring the weapons fire that cut through their ranks. 3 human ships died for every Zenthari vessel destroyed, but there were more humans than the Zenthari had expected. Far more. On the Conquest of Ages, Commander Vexthor watched his fleet crumble. This was not possible. The humans were inferior. Their technology was primitive. Their ships were small, but they were winning through sheer insane determination. They are ramming us, his tactical officer said in disbelief. Every ship. They are all ramming us. Then shoot them down, Vexthor roared. We are, Commander. But there are too many. And their military ships are targeting our weapons arrays while we are distracted by the civilian vessels. Vexthor understood then. The civilian ships were not just attacking. They were sacrificing themselves deliberately, creating openings for the military vessels to exploit. It was a strategy that required people willing to die for each other. The Zenthari had never faced such an enemy. Withdraw to defensive formation, he ordered. We will outlast them. But the humans did not let them regroup. They pressed the attack, ship after ship throwing themselves at the Zenthari lines. A human destroyer managed to get close enough to the Conquest of Ages to fire its main weapon directly into the shield generators. The Zenthari flagship's shields flickered and died. Admiral Grant to all vessels. Lisa's voice came across every frequency. The flagship is vulnerable. All available ships concentrate fire. 50 human ships changed course. They converged on the Conquest of Ages from every direction. Vexthor's crew fired desperately, destroying most of them. But 3 ships got through. The impacts rang through the massive ship like bells. Alarms screamed. Fires broke out on a dozen decks. The Conquest of Ages listed to one side, its engines damaged, its weapons offline. This is Admiral Grant of the Earth Defense Fleet, Lisa broadcast on all channels. Zenthari forces, you have one chance to surrender. Stand down now or we will destroy every ship you have. We will not stop. We will not retreat. You hurt one of ours, and we will make you pay for it even if it costs us everything. The Zenthari admiral looked at his displays. Half his fleet was gone. The other half was damaged and scattered. The humans had lost more ships in total numbers, but they were still coming, still fighting, still willing to die. He had never surrendered in his life. The Zenthari Empire had never surrendered in 3,000 years of warfare. He looked at the human fleet, at the thousands of ships that kept coming despite the losses. He thought about Commander Vexthor and the human woman he had struck down. He thought about what it meant that an entire species would go to war over a single person. All Zenthari vessels, he said quietly. Stand down. We surrender. The battle ended as suddenly as it had begun. The Zenthari ships powered down their weapons and shields. The human fleet stopped advancing, but maintained their positions ready to resume the attack if this was a trick. On Epsilon Prime, Jake watched from the hospital window. He could see the flashes of battle in the distance. Now they stopped. He looked down at Amy, still unconscious in her bed. It is done, he whispered. Justice is coming. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from dozens of species stood in shocked silence as the Zenthari fleet was escorted to holding positions by human ships. The unthinkable had happened. The most powerful military force in the galaxy had surrendered to humanity in less than 6 hours. Ambassador Chris Palmer stood at the central platform, his formal suit replaced with combat gear. He was not here for diplomacy anymore. The Galactic Council has failed in its duty, he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. You were created to ensure justice and peace. Instead, you protected the strong and ignored the weak. You allowed Commander Vexthor to assault an innocent woman and called it an accident. You chose politics over truth. Zorith, the council leader, flickered with distress. Ambassador, please. Let us resolve this peacefully. The Zenthari have surrendered. There is no need for further violence. You are right, Chris agreed. There is no need for violence. Just justice. Turn over Commander Vexthor for trial, and humanity will stand down. He has diplomatic immunity, a Zenthari representative protested. Council law protects him. Chris looked at the alien with cold eyes. Your law protected him. Human law does not. You have 1 hour to deliver him to us. After that, we will come and take him. The council erupted in arguments. Some species sided with humanity, finally finding courage now that the Zenthari had been humbled. Others feared what it meant if diplomatic immunity could be ignored. But Chris did not wait for them to decide. He left the chamber and headed for the hospital. Jake was standing now looking down at Amy. The doctor said her condition was stable but critical. The swelling in her brain had stopped increasing, which was good. But she still had not woken up. The machine still breathed for her. Chris, Jake said without turning around. Is it done? The fleet surrendered. The council is arguing about what to do with Vexthor. They are trying to hide him. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached under Amy's bed and pulled out a case. Inside was his combat armor, the gear he had worn during his years in Earth's military. It was not as advanced as alien technology, no energy shields or plasma weapons, just reinforced plating, a basic helmet and a kinetic firearm that used chemical propellants to fire metal bullets, primitive by galactic standards. But humans had been killing each other with such weapons for centuries. They knew how to use them very well. What are you doing? Chris asked, though he already knew. Getting justice, Jake said simply. He began putting on the armor. Each piece clicked into place with familiar ease. When he was done, he checked his weapon. It was loaded and ready. Jake, if you do this, there will be consequences. The council will have you arrested. They can try. Jake looked at his friend. Amy is lying in that bed because the council cares more about politics than people. I am done with diplomacy. I am done with laws that protect monsters. Vexthor hurt my mate. Now he answers to me. Chris nodded slowly. He had known this was coming. Ben and I are going with you. No, this is my responsibility. She is not just your mate, Jake. She is our friend, our colleague. We were there to negotiate peace, and they answered with violence. If you are going to face consequences, we face them together. Ben appeared in the doorway, also wearing combat armor. The captain is right. We are coming. Jake wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in their eyes. These were good men. Brothers in all but blood. He nodded once. The 3 humans left the hospital and walked through the station corridors. Aliens scattered out of their way. Word had spread about what humanity had done. These species had lived under Zenthari rule for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to fight back. Now they looked at the humans with a mixture of fear and awe. The Zenthari had taken refuge in their embassy section of the station. It was a fortress within the station, designed to withstand attack. Heavy doors, reinforced walls, security systems that could detect and neutralize most weapons. Jake walked up to the main entrance. 6 Zenthari guards stood there, each one 7 feet tall and covered in natural armor. They looked at the 3 humans and laughed. Go away, little ones, the lead guard said. You have no authority here. I am here for Commander Vexthor, Jake said calmly. He committed a crime. He will face justice. The commander has immunity. He does not answer to humans. Jake did not say anything else. He moved. The training came back instantly. Human close combat was brutal and efficient. It had been refined over thousands of years of warfare. The Zenthari were strong and armored, but they were used to fighting at a distance with energy weapons. They had never faced someone who knew exactly where and how to strike. Jake's first blow was to the lead guard's knee joint, the weak point in their natural armor. The guard dropped with a cry of pain. Before the others could react, Jake had moved behind the second guard and struck the nerve cluster at the base of its spine. The guard collapsed. Ben and Chris engaged the other guards. The fight was fast and brutal. The Zenthari were powerful, but the humans were faster and more skilled. In 90 seconds, all 6 guards were on the ground, alive but unable to fight. Jake stepped over them and placed a small explosive charge on the embassy door. It was just enough to blow the lock without damaging the station's hull. The door swung open. Inside the embassy was chaos. Zenthari diplomats and staff were trying to evacuate. They froze when they saw the 3 humans enter. Jake's armor was splattered with the guard's blood. His weapon was raised and ready. "Where is Vexthor?" Jake asked. No one answered. Jake fired a single shot into the ceiling. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. "I will ask one more time. Where is Commander Vexthor?" A young Zenthari, barely more than a child by their standards, pointed with a shaking hand toward a corridor. Jake nodded his thanks and moved forward. Ben and Chris covered the exits, making sure no one escaped or called for help. Jake found Vexthor in a secure room, surrounded by 4 more guards. These were elite soldiers, the best the Zenthari had. They were ready for him. It did not matter. The fight was harder than the one at the entrance. These guards knew what they were doing. But Jake had something they did not. He had rage. Cold-focused rage that had been building since he found Amy bleeding on the floor. He used every technique he knew, every dirty trick, every weakness in the Zenthari physiology that Amy's research had identified. One by one, the guards fell. Jake took hits that would have killed a normal human. His armor cracked. His ribs broke. But he did not stop. He could not stop. Not until this was done. Finally, only Vexthor remained. The Zenthari commander stood with his back to the wall, trying to maintain his dignity. But Jake could see the fear in his eyes. "You," Vexthor said. "You are the mate, the human female's male. Her name is Amy," Jake said quietly. "And yes, I am Jake, the man whose world you just destroyed. I have diplomatic immunity. You cannot touch me." Jake smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I do not care about your immunity. I do not care about council laws. You hurt Amy, you laughed about it, now you pay." He moved forward and grabbed Vexthor by his armored collar. The commander tried to fight back, but Jake was beyond feeling pain now. He dragged Vexthor out of the embassy, past the fallen guards, through the corridors of the station. Aliens watched in silence as a human in damaged armor pulled a Zenthari commander behind him like a child's toy. Some tried to stop him. Jake ignored them all. Security forces appeared but did not dare intervene. The human fleet was still in orbit, still watching. No one wanted to test their patience further. Jake dragged Vexthor into the council chamber and threw him on the floor in front of the assembly. The commander landed hard and did not get up. "Here is your diplomatic immunity," Jake said to the council. "Here is the monster you protected. Now you will watch as justice is served." He pulled out a data chip and inserted it into the chamber's display system. Amy's research appeared on every screen. Footage of Zenthari war crimes, attacks on civilian populations, destroyed hospital ships, executed prisoners. Years of atrocities that Amy had been quietly gathering, planning to present through proper diplomatic channels. "Amy Collins was going to show you this," Jake said. "She was going to prove that the Zenthari Empire has been committing war crimes for decades. She was going to ask for justice through your laws, your systems." And for that, Vexthor struck her down. He tried to silence the truth with violence. The council watched the evidence in horror. Even the Zenthari representatives looked shocked. They had not known the full extent of what their military had been doing. "Commander Vexthor," Zorith said finally, its voice heavy, "you are hereby stripped of diplomatic immunity. You will face trial for assault and war crimes under galactic law." Zenthari soldiers came forward to take their former commander into custody. Vexthor looked at Jake one last time. "This is not over, human," he said. Jake leaned close and whispered, "Yes, it is. You lose." The trial of Commander Vexthor lasted 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimonies came from survivors across multiple star systems. Species that had been too afraid to speak out before now found their courage. The Galactic Council, shamed by their own failure to act, ensured the trial was fair and public. Vexthor was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a neutral world, under guard by multiple species to ensure he could never escape. The Zenthari Empire, facing the reality of their crimes, agreed to pay reparations to every species they had wronged. Their military would be reduced and monitored by an independent galactic force. But the real change was deeper than laws and punishments. The galaxy had watched humanity go to war for a single person. They had seen humans sacrifice themselves by the thousands for one of their own. It was a concept most species could not understand. They thought in terms of populations and resources. Humans thought in terms of individuals and loyalty. The cost had been terrible. Over 2,000 human ships had been destroyed in the battle. Nearly 4,000 people had died. Families lost parents, children lost their futures, communities lost their members. Earth mourned. But even in their grief, humans stood united. Those who had died had done so protecting one of their own. In human culture, there was no greater honor. President Laura Mitchell addressed the Galactic Council in person 2 weeks after the battle. She stood at the central platform where Amy had once presented her research on cooperation. "We came to you in peace," Laura said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We offered friendship. We showed you our best, our brightest, our most compassionate." Dr. Amy Collins wanted nothing more than to help build a better galaxy where all species could thrive together. She paused, looking at each council member in turn. "You answered her kindness with violence. You protected her attacker. You thought humanity would accept this because we are new, because we are small, because we are outnumbered. You were wrong. Let this be a lesson to every species in this galaxy. Humans are loyal to their own. We protect our people. We do not abandon them. We do not forget those who harm them. Cross that line and you will face all of humanity, not just our military, not just our government. Every human everywhere will become your enemy. But," and here her voice softened slightly, "if you come to us in genuine peace, if you treat us with respect, if you work with us honestly, then you will find no better allies. We remember kindness as much as we remember cruelty. Choose wisely which one you show us." The council listened in silence. When Laura finished, Zorith spoke. "President Mitchell, the council offers its formal apology for failing to protect Dr. Collins. We have revised our diplomatic immunity protocols. No one will be above the law in such matters again." Laura nodded. "See that you keep that promise. Humanity will be watching." Jake spent every hour he could in the hospital with Amy. The doctors worked around the clock, using the best medical knowledge from multiple species. Human physicians collaborated with alien specialists, sharing techniques and learning from each other. The assault on Amy had sparked an unexpected benefit. Species that had barely spoken to each other before were now working together to save her life. 3 weeks after the battle, Jake was reading to Amy from one of her favorite books. The doctor said hearing familiar voices might help, even if she could not respond. He had just finished a chapter when he felt her hand move in his. At first, he thought it was his imagination. Then her fingers squeezed just slightly. Jake's heart nearly stopped. He called for the doctors, his voice breaking with hope and fear. They came running. Machines were checked. Tests were performed. Then slowly, Amy's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, struggling to see. Jake leaned close so he would be the first thing she saw clearly. "Amy," he whispered. "I am here. You are safe." Her lips moved, trying to form words. Jake brought water to help her dry throat. Finally, she managed to speak. "What happened?" Her voice was barely audible. Jake wanted to tell her everything. About the battle, the trial, the changes sweeping through the galaxy. But looking at her weak form in the hospital bed, he decided that could wait. "You were hurt," he said simply. "But you are going to be okay now. Everything else can wait. Just rest." Over the following weeks, Amy slowly recovered. The brain damage was not as severe as the doctors had feared. She had some memory gaps and would need physical therapy to regain her full coordination. But she was alive, she was awake, and she was going to recover. As she got stronger, Jake told her what had happened. How humanity had rallied. How the fleet had come. How Vexthor now sat in a cell paying for his crimes. Amy listened quietly, tears streaming down her face. So many died, she said. Because of me. No, Jake said firmly. Because of Vexthor. Because of a system that protected the powerful and ignored justice. You did nothing wrong, Amy. You were trying to help and you were punished for it. Humanity just made sure that could never happen again. 3 months after the attack, Amy was well enough to leave the hospital. A crowd had gathered outside not to gawk but to show support. Aliens from dozens of species held signs with messages of hope and apology. Human ships in orbit fired a salute as she emerged. The Galactic Council had arranged for a new station to be built, a symbol of the new era of cooperation. It would be called Collins Station, named in honor of Amy and her vision of species working together. Every major civilization contributed resources to its construction. Even the Zenthari sent materials and workers, trying to make amends for their past actions. On the day the station's foundation was laid, Jake and Amy stood together watching the ceremony. She was still recovering, leaning on him for support, but her mind was sharp as ever. She had already begun working on new proposals for interspecies cooperation, determined to make something positive come from the tragedy. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "Real cooperation, real peace." Jake put his arm around her carefully, mindful of her healing injuries. "I think you showed them it is possible. You tried to build bridges. They learned the hard way what happens when those bridges are destroyed. Maybe now they will choose to build instead of tear down." Amy looked up at him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up on me, for bringing me home." "Always," Jake said. "That is what humans do. We protect our own. We never leave anyone behind. And we never ever forget." They stood together watching the new station take shape, a monument to both the costs of violence and the possibilities of peace. Around them, species that had barely acknowledged each other before worked side by side. The galaxy had learned its lesson in 6 hours of battle and 3 weeks of mourning. Humanity had earned its place not through conquest or dominance, but through loyalty and determination. They had shown that they would go to war for a single person. More importantly, they had shown they were just as committed to peace when that peace was genuine. As the sun of Epsilon Prime's star set behind the construction site, casting long shadows across the gathering, Amy squeezed Jake's hand. He looked down at her and saw not the broken woman from the hospital bed, but the brilliant scientist who had believed in a better future. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Amy smiled, the first real smile since before the attack. "I am thinking about my next proposal, about ways to improve medical cooperation between species, about educational exchanges, about everything we can still do." Jake laughed softly. "You nearly died and you are already planning more work?" "That is what humans do," she said, echoing his words. "We do not give up. We keep trying. We keep building. That is why we will succeed, Jake. Not because we are the strongest or the most advanced, because we never stop caring." And as the stars came out above them, the galaxy watched and learned. Humanity had arrived and nothing would ever be the same again. The lesson was clear. Humans were willing to fight to protect their own, but they were also willing to forgive, to build, to hope. They were dangerous when threatened, but invaluable as allies. The choice of which side to be on was simple. Never hurt a human's mate, but always welcome their friendship. The galaxy would remember that lesson for generations to come, and at the center of it all, 2 humans stood together, survivors of an attack that had changed everything, ready to build a future worth fighting for. The end of one story, the beginning of a new chapter for humanity among the stars.